In the year 2048, humanity was stuck in wars that were destroying the planet. Radioactive sandstorms and floods made many regions unsuitable for living, and a rapidly increasing population led to hunger and poverty. To save humanity from extinction, scientists decided to take an unprecedented step: colonize another planet. Professor Martin Collingwood, who headed the US Defense Department's scientific division, proposed the largest satellite of Saturn, Titan, as the new home for the human race. However, the temperature on the surface is unbearable for humans. The atmosphere is mostly composed of nitrogen, and its rivers and lakes are filled with liquid methane. Humanity doesn't have time for terraforming the satellite, and Collingwood suggests going a different route, using genetics to modify the human body and adapt it to life in harsh conditions on the surface of Titan. For this bold experiment, 14 volunteers were selected. They were chosen specifically for demonstrating the ability to survive in the most challenging conditions. Thus, fighter pilot Rick Jensen, who lived in a Syrian desert without water and food for 3 days, together with his wife Abigail and son Lucas, ended up at the NATO operational base. Dr. Freya settled Jensen's family in a cozy house on the territory of the Titan I Resource Center. She warned Rick that in the next few weeks they will all receive 300 injections that will start the accelerated evolution process. Rick's wife is getting used to a new life at a secret facility. She's meeting the families of the volunteers and inviting everyone to a barbecue. A few days later, all the neighbors gather at their house. The families hang out and have fun, trying not to think about the upcoming separation from their loved ones. One night, Rick suddenly collapses due to a choking attack, which Abigail successfully treated with tablets. After some time, promising results of the experiment appeared. The volunteers gained the ability to stay underwater for a long time and swim very quickly. However, Rick's results were the best, as he managed to stay underwater for more than 40 minutes. In the evening, Rick spends time with his family, telling his son with enthusiasm about the planet where people will live in the future. Rick joins his wife in the pool, and Abby reassures her husband of her love, and tells him that she fully supports him. While embracing Rick, Abigail accidentally notices that the blood vessels on his back have become darker, but decides not to tell him about it. The next day, while Rick is undergoing another operation, Abigail meets her neighbor Ryan, and the two women confess to each other that they are afraid for their husbands. Abby tries to comfort Ryan by saying that these sacrifices are necessary for the future of their children. In the middle of the night, Abigail wakes up and finds that her husband Rick is not in bed. She goes to the kitchen, where she sees Rick sitting with an ice pack on his neck, suffering from the heat, even though the thermostat in the house shows a very low temperature. He has noticed that the temperature that humans are used to has become unbearable for him. Rick no longer feels cold, and he demonstrates this to his wife by putting his hands into the container of ice. As the subjects adapt to an environment similar to Titan, the intensity of their training becomes increasingly difficult. In a show, Rick discovers that his hair is falling out, and suddenly a woman named Ramos falls and quickly dies in convulsions. This event greatly upsets the others, and during dinner the group tries to understand what happened to her. They all realize that their mission is extremely dangerous, but they did not expect to encounter death so quickly. In the morning, Freya comes to the family to give Rick necessary injections. They ask her about the cause of Ramos' death, but she evades the question and says Ramos had kidney stones. Abigail starts to worry about her husband and secretly takes a sample of Rick's blood to conduct her own research. Abigail becomes even more alarmed when she discovers hidden cameras installed throughout the house. It's clear that Rick's body continues to mutate. He spends more and more time at the bottom of the pool to improve his condition, and his skin has started to peel off in large pieces. Soon, Abigail examines Rick's blood under a microscope and finds signs of an unknown living creature. Since Titan receives much less light than Earth, Rick undergoes a surgery on his cornea to adapt his eyes to the darkness. However, he experiences complications and is urgently taken to the operating room. After returning home, Abigail witnesses a new incident. Her neighbor Zane flew into a rage and threw his wife Ryan out of the window, killing her. The military had no choice but to eliminate the threat. While Rick is unconscious, Abigail steals his keycard and sneaks into Professor Collingwood's office. There she finds a lot of information about the experiment. On a table are folders with personal files of the test subjects, containing reports on autopsies of those who, for various reasons, failed to evolve into a new species of human, Homo titanians. At the same time, a representative from NASA accuses Martin Collingwood of immorality. NASA has not received any real evidence of the experiment's effectiveness, and considers the idea of forced evolution to be ridiculous and unrelated to space exploration. They demand the program be shut down, and everyone leave the base immediately. However, many respond that they are on an innate base that supports continuing the experiment. The next morning, the professor tries to convince Rick to undergo a serious brain operation that would help him adapt to his new body. but Abigail declares that she will no longer allow scientists to turn her husband into an animal. Suddenly, Collingwood decides to reveal information about the experiment. It turns out that the DNA of a creature from Titan was injected into the bodies of the volunteers. According to Collingwood, this was supposed to cause mutation and accelerate the adaptation of the human body to the conditions of life on a distant planet. After 24 hours, Rick's vision returns, and he calls the professor to tell him that he can now see everything. There is no more darkness, and he is determined to continue the experiment. Soon Rick and a few other participants undergo surgery. However, in the end, only 2 people survive, Tali and Rick. Collingwood immediately calls Abigail and tells her that they are flying to Titan in 2 days. Abigail was horrified when she saw her husband's new body. Rick's body has changed, and he can no longer speak human language. Homo Titanians communicate through tactile contact and low frequencies, which humans cannot hear. While waiting for the shuttle launch, Rick returns home. He remembers everything and still loves his family, but he can never tell them again. Later, Talia visits Rick. She killed her husband in the shower, and a captured team was sent after her. Seeing her with Rick, Abby gets scared and hides with Lucas in his room. Meanwhile, the Aryan soldiers immobilized Talia with tranquilizer darts and prepared to capture her, but as they approached, she killed several of them. For this, Talia was immediately shot, and Rick decides to eliminate the remaining soldiers. An alarm was immediately raised throughout the base, and heavily armed soldiers set out to find Rick, who had escaped. Only Abby knew where to look for her husband, and soon she found him on a hill, where he used to love coming to. The couple stared into each other's eyes for a long time, then kissed, and at that moment, a military helicopter found them. After some time, Abigail wakes up in a hospital bed. Professor Collingwood asks her to help him send Rick to Titan. The Earth's atmosphere no longer suits him, but Rick refuses to leave the planet because he is deeply attached to his family. According to Professor, the only way out of the situation is a chemical lobotomy, and Abigail must inject Rick with the ampoule herself. However, Abigail is against this because she doesn't want Rick to forget them, so she takes advantage of the moment and switches the ampoule to a harmless medication. Rick escapes from captivity. While the military tries to find and shoot him, Abby and Freya find Lucas and end the heavily injured Rick. While Freya gives him first aid, Collingwood and his military squad find them. The professor gives the order to shoot them, but the colonel refuses to kill unarmed women and children, and then arrests Collingwood. Rick still goes to Titan, and begins to explore the second largest moon in the solar system, while Abby and Freya work on a new project, called Titan II.